Last week on September 6th, I was invited to the Uganda Secondary School Head Teachers Association, which meets, I think, once a year, as a keynote speaker on what is required to prepare students for the current automation, or call it digitization of education. I enjoyed the journey to Hoima. I've not been there in a long time, and it was interesting. You know, it's always, travel is big school, as they say. Whenever you travel, you learn a few things here and there. And it was interesting to talk to this audience, about 2,000 people in 2 tents in Duhaga Secondary School. That's where they camped. I gather they meet and they go to one school of ours, and they discuss issues that affect them. One of the trending things today in education is the online learning. And what is happening around us is that Africa is still thinking about going online. The developed countries, Europe, and of course countries like China, have already moved there. What does it take to get to online learning? First of all, it takes availability of equipment. You have the equipment that you require. You have the computers. And now, if you're talking about online learning, you're talking about, does the student have the equipment? 2, it talks about availability of electricity. In this country, I think access to electricity is about 22%. About an average 20% of people have access to electricity. But what do they use it for? Mainly lighting, or those who have industries for industries. I use gas in my house to cook because I feel electricity is on the high side. 3, you need the internet itself. You know, so depending on where you are, do you have the availability? Is internet available? I mean, today they say fiber optic is the best. So how much fiber have we laid in this country? So look at the schools outside Kampala, even within possibly the central region, but a little way off the streets, the main roads, highways. Do they have access to internet? Now, you may have access to internet, but do you have the money? That's another point. Do you have the money to buy the data? So those are what is ordinarily called facilitating conditions. So you may have them, and then you have a problem with attitude. You and the students, you know. I remember when I was teaching in MUMS, one of the challenges they got one time, I think just before COVID, a group of people wrote me a letter saying, we don't want online teaching. And I think even when it was introduced, there was some kind of resistance from the students. I mean, teaching online, teaching face-to-face is wonderful when you see people you are dealing with. It's very good. I mean, you relate, you develop social capital, unlike online where it's really very impartial. So what I was talking to the head teachers about was exactly this, that as a country, we are in a situation where all those are not in place. You know, they're not in place, not just yet. So what we need to do is for government to be able to understand that we must move in this direction. If 80% of your population is in rural areas, how can they get online? If 80% of your people do not have access to electricity, how can they get online? If possibly 99% of your people don't have access to computers, how can they get online? I mean, these are the issues. So I was creating awareness about what you call facilitating conditions and the attitude of the leaders themselves in ensuring that this change is taking place. And how do you introduce change in the organization? You know, keep in mind that most change effort fails. More than 50% of change initiated in organizations fails. I had some miserable failures when I was principal of MOOCs, especially at the stage of computerization. It was not so good. We failed. And there are many other areas where we failed with trying to create change. And the main reason is resistance to change by the change players. So for the schools, if they don't have the money, what they need to do, but the process of creating change is, first of all, make sure there is that desire. The people feel that they actually have to change. You know, there must be a compelling need for change. That we see, if we don't change, this is what we're going to lose. Now, in our conditions, what happens if one school doesn't change? You know, what happens when all these poor people cannot afford? Will you actually be able to change? Maybe not. So there's a balance that we must create in our conditions if we are going to be able to initiate this change that we're looking at. Then, of course, you need to put up teams to do this. You must communicate very well. You must you must have a clear vision of what you expect to get. Where are you going? When we introduce this change, what shall we have? You must educate people. You must convince them, get them to buy in, and you must put in place a mechanism of monitoring what's happening, so that at the end of the day, you are able to measure what the change that you have been initiating and say to yourself, yes, this is what I've done. I've been able to do this. So I think what I read from the mood I read from the head teachers was that, yes, we would like to change, but we don't have the money to do it. And probably that's the biggest factor. So as government, as the political leadership in the country, we need to have this in a wonderful plan. How do we move this country to create equity, especially among the poor, in terms of computerization, in terms of digitization, in terms of preparing the student for the automation or the digitization that we are seeing? If we don't do that, this country will remain in history, and many other African countries, as countries that will never